I usually have a drink when I do an event, but it's going to be like 9 because it was with somewhere where there was a time difference. And she said it's going to be 9 o'clock in the morning where they are, and they're going to think what can I do? And somebody said, just put it in a mug and they'll think it's like coffee or tea or something. So,
Yeah.
so I asked, thinking, oh, you'd say, oh, it's just tea or something. But no, well done. That's very, so you subscribe to doing that as well. I did think about it earlier, but if I wanted to have a beer, I'd just have one. But then that's me.
And we're live as we talk about what's in our mugs. Hi everyone, and welcome to our author chat with Amer. And I'm going to hand over to him to introduce himself and his books first.
Okay, hello. My name's Amer Anwar, and I'm the author of 2 novels. The first is called Brothers in Blood, and it won the CWA debut dagger for the best unpublished writer. That was quite a while ago. And when it came out, it went on to be picked by both the Times and the Guardian as one of their thrillers of the year. And then my second novel, Stone Cold Trouble, is due out this coming Thursday, and it's a sequel to Brothers in Blood. So it features the same 2 main characters, and that's Zach Khan, who's an ex-con, and his best friend Jags. And they both live in an area called Southall, which is in West London, and it's a big Asian community. So the first book and the second one is basically them getting themselves in some rather sticky situations and having to work their way out of it in both cases. The first one ostensibly is the case of a missing girl that Zach is kind of strong-armed into trying to track down. And at first, that's all it seems that it is, just a girl who's run away from home. But as he's trying to find her, more and more things crop up, and it's not quite as clear-cut as he's been led to believe. And in the second book, Stone Cold Trouble, Jags's uncle has lost a very valuable necklace in a poker game, which he put it down as a marker, hoping to get it back. But the person who has it is refusing to give it back. So he enlists the help of Zach and Jags to try and retrieve the necklace. And then at the same time, Zach's brother is viciously assaulted and put in hospital. And Zach is wondering whether it's something from his past catching up with him, and whether it was actually someone trying to send him a message. So he needs to find out who was behind the assault on his brother, while at the same time trying to help Jags retrieve this necklace for his uncle. Needless to say, none of those things go particularly smoothly.
Great. Well, I'm going to start off with the questions that Mike and Joanne sent you.
Okay.
So Mike started off, he said, you owe him a pint.
I always owe him a pint.
Apparently.
I'm sure he said he owes me a pint as well.
And he also says, how much alike are you and Zach?
Well, I've never been to prison. I guess we're a bit alike because it's always easy to put some of your traits into a character because you you understand them and stuff like that. He's much better at fighting than I am. I don't really get into fights. I try and talk my way out of it, or buy people pints. But yeah, and Zach's actually, he grew up in Southall and stuff like that, and I don't actually. People assume that I sort of grew up there as well, but I didn't. I grew up outside of Southall, but I knew lots of people from the area, and I think it was being an outsider that kind of made the place more interesting. Because I didn't just see it as home; it sort of had a certain allure for me, and that's what made me want to set a book there and write about those characters that inhabit that area. But I think a lot of the interactions between Zach and Jags, they're very much based on the interactions that I have with my friends who are from that area, and that kind of, I suppose, the kind of banter and the one-liners and taking the mickey out of each other, that's very much sort of based on myself and my friends.
Great. And Joanne wants to know when you're going to Cumbria.
Well, yeah, when there's no sort of lockdown and things like that to worry about, yeah, I'd love to. I'm sure I would have gone up at some point this summer, possibly, if it hadn't been for everything that's going on. But yeah, I'd like to come up. I'll buy Mike that pint when I'm up there.
That might have turned into a few with interest by then.
Yeah, I'll take him a jar of peanut butter and a jar of Marmite as well because he really loves those.
Does he?
Yeah, apparently.
Oh, nice. The things you find out. So we've got a question on the stream from Sam. She says, how did the accolades for the book so far feel?
The accolades, well, for both books, feel great. I mean, with the first book, it was a real shock because I'd only written the first chapter when I entered it for the debut Dagger competition, and I'd never sort of tried writing a book before. It was my first attempt at a novel, and I had this first chapter, and I sent it in really just to get my first rejection, because I know that every author there's a long road to getting published, and I've read loads of interviews and and people say how many rejections they had, and I thought, well, let me just start and getting used to getting these rejections. So I entered the first chapter and I thought nothing of it. I thought, that's fine. I'll just get a form letter,
Right.
and it'll just toughen me up. I'll get a thicker skin from it. But the first letter I got said I'd been shortlisted. So, and that year was a particularly busy year, and they get entrants like from all over the world. So just to be shortlisted was amazing. And then I went to the actual awards ceremony and on the night, and I was announced as the winner. So yeah, it was a complete shock, and I think it really took a while to sort of sink in. But that got me an agent. I have the same agent as Val McDermott, so I've got a top agent, and then she wanted to read the rest of the book. But as I say, I'd only written by that point. By the time I'd sort of actually won the award, I'd written 3 chapters. And so my agent was like, well, okay, I need to read the rest of it. And I said, yeah, well, I haven't written it. And she said, well, how long do you think it's going to take you to finish? I had no idea how long it took to write a book. So I like, gives me a strange look. It's like 6 months to write a book. And my agent didn't bat an eyelid. So she must have thought, well, if he can write a book in 6 months, that's 2 books a year, ka-ching, basically. But it was 5 years before I actually sent her a draft that I was happy with. And then I might have been happy with it, but there was still work to be done. So it took another couple of years of working on it before it was ready. So that was 8 years. And then it took 2 years to get published because it was turned down by every publisher it went to. So I didn't get my rejections at the beginning. I got them sort of once the book was done. So when it did eventually get published, and then it started to get really good reviews, it was reviewed in a lot of national papers very favourably. And as I mentioned, it was picked as one of the thrillers of the year by the Times and the Guardian. I was just, I was sort of, it was a real sort of pinch me moment. It was great to receive those accolades, but it was kind of unexpected because because the book had been sort of turned down by all those publishers. You do kind of wonder, well, maybe it's not good enough. But all the feedback from the publishers had been really positive. They'd all said, oh, it's really well written, it's really pacey, it's got great characters, great dialogue, great action, great setting. So I was really left scratching my head. Well, what more do you want from a crime novel? But I think it came down to really the setting and the characters being Asian. And the publishers just thought that it wouldn't appeal to a mass audience. And I have to say I disagreed with that because I'd written it first and foremost as a crime thriller, and it just happened that those characters were Asian. And I felt it shouldn't really matter once you got into the story. And my agent was, she agreed with me, and she was, telling publishers they were mad not to publish it and stuff. And so that sort of belief from her made me think, well, I think people should read it. So I just, I got it out to people to read, and the reviews started to come in. It got really positive feedback, and then I was sort of foisting it on people at events and sort of writing festivals and things like that. I'd go up to authors and say, "Oh, would you like to read my book?" You know, it won the debut dagger, and I think that got quite a few people who might not have looked at it otherwise to read it. And people like Anne Cleves, and she was lovely, and she read the book, and then she emailed me. She was on a book tour in Canada, and she emailed me and said, "I can't believe no one would publish this." So, but
Wow.
yeah, so every sort of good review and accolade means a lot, because it took a lot to get to that point.
You'd think having the debut dagger would make publishers more interested
You'd think
in
so.
publishing it as well.
Yeah, you'd think so, but it didn't turn out to be the case. I think they looked at it because it had won the debut dagger, but then when they read it, they felt, even despite that it perhaps they couldn't, or it wouldn't sell, it wouldn't appeal to like a broad enough audience. That was one of the comments I got back from a publisher was, I could never envisage it breaking out to a broad audience. And I think one of the most heartening things that did happen was when I got one of the early reviews was from a lady, and she wrote, and I sort of remember this because it really sort of like, it meant a lot to me at the time when I read it. And she said, "I'm not sure if I'm the right target audience for this book, because I'm female, I'm over 40, I'm Scottish, but I absolutely loved it." And so that's all I really wanted, was for people to just enjoy the book, for what it was, and just go with the ride of the story and along with the characters. And that's sort of what happened when people actually did read it. That was the sort of reaction it got.
So this one, it says in my copy that it was published in 2018.
That's right.
Yeah. How long has the other one taken you to write, number 2?
Well, that one took 8 years all told. The second one took 2 years. So I am getting a little bit quicker.
What's your writing process like?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting one, because with the first book, Brothers in Blood, obviously I had no real idea what I was doing. I was just trying to figure out how to write a book as I was writing a book, and so it took a lot of rewriting. And my process, I think I was really trying to discover my process and work out what it was. So I thought inspiration would just sort of come to me and carry me along. So I didn't plan anything out. I just wrote, and I started writing and seeing where it took me, because I'd read that some authors do that, and that works for them. But I wrote it, and I sort of wrote myself down quite a few dead ends, and I would get to, and I'd think, scratch my head and think, well, I'm not quite sure where it would go from here. And so I'd go back a few chapters and then carry the story on from there. And about halfway through the book, because it was written over quite a long time, the first draft, I had to keep referring back to what had happened before, because I couldn't remember. I thought, hang on, where did this bit happen, and what exactly did they say, and things like that. So I'd have to like leaf through, because I was writing it all longhand in notebooks. Because I found work on the computer, I would just go over and over, like if I'd written a page, I'd go over and over that page, and oh, that's not right, this is not right. And I didn't have lots of time, because I was working full time and everything, to write. And then I'd read an article somewhere that if you write longhand, it forces you just to keep going, because there's only so much you can cross out. And that seemed to work for me. So I was writing it longhand, so I had to just leaf through these notebooks and try and find things. And then I sort of thought, well, I need to write a plan sort of retroactively of what's happened, so that I know where to find these things. So I sort of wrote this plan out of things that had happened. I thought, actually, that's quite useful. Maybe I should do one for what might happen going forward. And so that's what I did. And it was a very loose sort of plan. It was just, a couple of sentences for each sort of section or scene that I had in mind. And that worked really well. And so for the second book, and I think this might have had a lot to do with me being able to write it quicker, I did plan it out from start to finish. and it was a very loose plan, just a couple of sentences for each chapter, like this is what I envisage is going to happen. But it was so loose that I sort of chopped it and changed it, and as other ideas came, I could just alter it and stuff. And that this time that worked for me really well. Although I do have to say that because I did that, I kind of knew where some of the twists were coming. So when I got to the end of the book, and then I was doing the second draft, I did kind of think, oh, well, is that too easy to guess? Will people see this happening? Is there not enough tension or mystery or thrill there? But so yeah, I was very unsure. But then when it went to my editor, she loved it, and she said it was really good. And then my agent really liked it, my publisher loved it. So then I was thinking, oh, maybe it was all right then.
So we've got quite a lot of comments coming in on the stream. Mike says, no, I effing don't like peanut butter and Wi-Fi. You had me believing you then.
Yeah, well, it shows he's listening. I knew. Yeah.
Were you just checking?
I knew it would wind him up.
And Jenny O'Brien, one of our author members, said, is it okay to read Stone Cold Trouble first?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you can read it as a standalone, but I think if you've read the first one, there's certain things that kind of carry forward. And I think if you read those, having read the first book, you'll kind of understand what's behind it and kind of get more enjoyment out of it. But it wouldn't detract. I mean, you could read the other one after. You just might. I've tried to keep certain mention of things that have happened in the first book quite vague, which wasn't sort of easy to do without giving anything away. You'll have an inkling of certain things, but I think you'll still enjoy the first one if you read it afterwards.
Great. And Sam, who's the other sort of author chat admin that we have, says she's having a look at the books behind you. Who are your favourite authors? I think you have to say Mike now.
Yeah, of course, Mike. Yeah, well, I do. I love Mike's books. They're so good. So many. I mean, like I could spend this whole author chat basically just talking about favourite authors. The three authors that I reread regularly, because those are the authors that I really take a lot of inspiration from, are Elmore Leonard, Richard Stark, his Parker novels, and another American author called Joe R. Lansdale, who writes the Hap and Leonard series.
Yeah, the Hap and Leonard series.
Yeah, you have read them.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, they're fantastic. I love them. So those are three authors that I sort of keep rereading like regularly, because that's sort of what I aspire to. So, if I just sort of keep reading them, I think, oh yeah, okay, all right, yeah. And just, I think that I having now written a couple of books, I kind of appreciate the craft and how they do what they do. And in terms of like favorite books that I've read recently, I'd say We Begin at the End by Chris Whitaker was absolutely fantastic. Seven Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle is one of my absolute faves. And Mike Craven's books, both of them. I think Black Summer that one really kept me guessing. I've got The Curator just over there. It's not on the shelf there. It's there. I'm going to read it very soon. But Black Summer, I absolutely loved that because I just couldn't work it out. And I found that really, really enjoyable. He really did sort of keep me guessing. So well done, Mike.
It's great as well.
Yeah, I know. I've heard so much about it, and I really do want to sort of get to it. But my reading sort of dropped off a cliff during this whole lockdown thing. I used to read every day on my commute to work, and I thought I'd have more time to read being at home, but I seem to have less, which is annoying. But yeah, so I think those books, just off the top of my head, but I could name so many more. And in different genres as well, because I don't just read crime, but I like quite a wide range of things.
So one of the other questions that came in on the stream is, what other jobs have you done apart from writing?
Quite a few. It says in my bio as well. So when I left college, I was a warehouse assistant for a few years. That was a very physical job. I was a driver for emergency doctors, so I'd drive doctors when out of hours, when doctor surgeries are shut, and so I'd basically drive all over sort of West London and outside of London, so like sort of Berkshire and Buckinghamshire and places like that. I was a comic book lettering artist for a while, so I would write the text that went into the speech balloons and the sound effects in comic strips. Sort of do all those by hand. I was a chalet rep in the French Alps. I've worked for BT on their before people had mobile phones on the radio pager section, where you'd have like 96 characters, but they would have to phone an operator and give the message, and I would have to type it in and send it to the pager. So that was an interesting job. And then, yeah, for a long time, I was working in the home entertainment industry as a designer and an art worker. So I've worked on DVD packaging for things like Captain America and Spider-Man, Casino Royale. I did all those sort of covers. So if you've seen those in the shops, that was all my handiwork. And then, yeah, then the writing came quite late to me. I was sort of I didn't start writing after I left sort of school. I think about the age of 13, they stop you sort of writing creatively, and it's all essays and stuff like that. So I didn't try and write any fiction again until I was 35 or 36.
So how much of a say did you have in your covers yourself, if you're such a good, because they're quite different. Sorry, I'll show you this one.
Don't worry, I know what I'm sure the others don't, but it's funny, they did send me they sent me a few variations, and I gave them some of my thoughts, and then they kind of took some of them but ignored others. So I mean, there's the sales department, and they were talking with the first book. They were talking to one of the supermarkets as well, and they had some input, and that sort of trumped anything that I said because they're a supermarket. And I just kind of, I mean, I do like that cover as well. I think initially I'd gone for a different color scheme that I'd liked, and they went with that maybe because it was brighter on the shelf. But I really liked that. And with the new book, they sent me a lot of different versions, and I picked a few that I liked. And the one that is on the cover is one that I did. And then I was able to work with the designer a little bit on some of the layout and stuff. Oh, and Mike's got a quote on the cover of it, actually, of the new one. Yeah, he has. He's got prime praise in the round circle, so that's why he owes me a beer.
You can keep trying to convince him.
He's much bigger than me. I really couldn't convince him of anything.
So one of our members, TK Gearing, who's an author as well, wants to know how you prepared for this interview, if at all.
Well, I did download the app. So I downloaded the BeLive app, and I've done a few interviews before. So I didn't really prepare too much. I just thought I'd come on and just chat. It is author chat, so hopefully I thought it was chat. I wasn't going to get like a real tough, hard grilling that was going to leave me in tears.
Yeah, well, I'll try not to leave you in tears.
Thank you.
She also wants to know how you feel about reviews, love or intensely dislike.
Well, what sort of reviews? I mean, I've loved the reviews that I've had in the papers. They've been really great. So I'm like so happy with them. But generally, I do sometimes sort of like look at the reviews. I look at the reviews on Amazon now and again. And you do, as an author, you can't help reading the bad ones because you want to know what people are saying, and and I just, what can you do? I just shrug my shoulders, and to make myself feel better, I look at some of the books that I really love, and you go onto their pages, and they have 1-star reviews as well. And then I read the 1-star reviews for other books that I love, and I just think, well, people have got no clue what they're on about. Obviously, like if they don't, a book I love, if someone else doesn't love it, then I'm like, okay, well, we'll have to agree to disagree because I think this book is great, and there's obviously if you don't, then we're never going to see eye to eye. on things. And so then when I sort of see people that not liking my book, and I think, well, that's fine, because they might not like some of the other books that I really do like. And it's horses for courses. And I think, luckily for me, more people seem to like it than dislike it. So, I don't take it too much to heart.
Apparently, I have to ask about the cheese review.
I bet that was Mike again. Mike loves that review. So I had I think I had a review for the book, and it was a verified purchase as well. So this person had definitely bought the book. Let me try and remember. So the review was, the recipes in this book are very well laid out and very clear, and the ingredients are very easy to get. I'm really looking forward to making my first cheese. And it was 5 stars. So I'm not complaining, but if anyone buys the book on the basis of that review, they're going to be giving me a 1 star. They're going to say, I couldn't find the cheese recipe. What's
Might be a
going
bit
on?
confused.
They would be very confused.
So, what kind of research do you do for your book? Because it's really interesting premise. Because they're not, Zach kind of gets drawn into the investigation more by bad luck, doesn't he?
He does. So I could say that my review is, I know a lot about bad luck, but that's not true. I think one of the reasons that I picked my character, my main character, being he's not a traditional detective. He's an ex-con, and he gets drawn into this kind of mystery and an investigation of sorts, because he's trying to track down this missing girl. But really, that sort of decision was more than partly made by the fact that I don't know anyone in the police that ask about procedures and stuff like that. I did try and get in touch with, like, the police in Southall and places like that to try and get to talk to somebody, but nobody would talk to me. So then I thought, well, research is going to be really hard work, and I can't be bothered with that. So I'll just make my character, he's not going to be a policeman, so I don't have to worry about doing any of that, legal police research. And then I thought, well, he doesn't know anything about how to find somebody, and neither do I. So we've got that in common. So I basically went through the book and thought, well, what would I do if I was in his situation and I had to try and find this missing girl? What would I try and do? And I just kind of, made it up as I went along, tried to do that. And whenever he got to one sort of dead end, then it'd be like, okay, what could he try next? And that's just kind of how the book kind of came together, really, in that way. A bit haphazard, I guess it sounds.
So there's a question on here. It just says YouTube views, but it says, what's next for Zach and Jags?
That's a very good question. Can I get back to you when I know the answer? I really don't know at the moment. The thing was, I just finished Stone Cold Trouble, and just before Stone Cold Trouble, I'd actually planned out a completely different novel, and I'd started writing it. But then, when I got the publishing deal for for Brothers in Blood, my publisher said, well, what are you writing next? And I told her about this standalone, and she said, that sounds really great, but could you do a sequel? Could you do another Zach and Jags book first? So I said, okay, yeah. So then I had to come up with the idea, and I wrote Stone Cold Trouble. And that was one of the reasons why it took a little bit longer, because I didn't have an idea ready to go. And so I did that, thinking that I would then be able to go back to this standalone book. And so I've gone back to the standalone, and then, we asked the question, my agent went to my publisher and said, so, what are the next steps? What are we going to do now? What's the plan? What would you like? And they came back and, oh, what does Amer think? And so I said, well, I've got this standalone, then maybe another Zach and Jags book, and I've got an idea for a historical thriller as well. Not very historical, not sort of roughs and all that. It's set just after the Second World War. And my publisher said, well, we'd love another Zach and Jags book next, and then the standalone. So I've only just found out, I think it was just this week I got the email saying, yeah, it's another Zach and Jags book next. So I have to sort of put on my thinking cap and sort of work out what's going to happen to them next.
That was Mike who asked that.
Was it Mike? Mike's got a lot of questions for me.
He said he was really looking forward to the chat. this morning when you sent me the questions before we went live.
So he thought he had time to think up a lot of questions then.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, he's been thinking about them. Judith O'Reilly says, did you talk to any ex-cons before you wrote the book?
I didn't actually. But funnily enough, I did talk to some real life cons after the book came out. I went and gave a talk in a prison, which was really interesting, and I think they really enjoyed it because, well, one, the character's an ex-con, and just because I wasn't quite what they imagined an author to be, and so my story of getting to publication and writing about places that I knew and people that I knew, they really kind of gelled with them and kind of struck a chord, and so that was really good. And one of them who was sitting in the front row, he did say, "Listen, if you need any advice, on armed robbery, I'm your man." And I thought, yeah, but you're sitting in here. So, I'd rather if it was my main character, I'd want them to get away with
it. Well, I didn't think about it that way. So one of my favourite questions to ask, and I'm interested because you said about doing lettering, is would you make a graphic novel of your books?
Would I, or would I let somebody else?
Would you let somebody else? Would you work with somebody else to make one?
I don't see why not. But I think coming from a comic background, I probably would be quite involved. I could see it working, but I mean, it's quite a big book, and I don't know. And I think it could work visually. So I never thought about it being a graphic novel. I have sort of thought about it being like on TV, obviously, and possibly a movie. But I think the way the book's written, the length of it, and the structure of it, it could work perfectly as a 4-part TV drama. So I'm just, if any TV producers are watching.
Have you cast Slack and Jags in your mind?
You know what? I haven't. But every time there's an Asian actor on TV, I'm like, could he? Could he be? Maybe. But I haven't. No, I haven't. I don't have anybody in mind for those characters yet. I think if I saw somebody, I would know, or that would sort of spark something. But yeah, not at the moment. But it'd be very interesting to try and cast it. And I think maybe that's one of the things that would hamper a TV adaptation. Again, is people thinking, oh, well, it'd be an all Asian sort of cast and stuff like that. But then I tweeted recently that the BBC did a Suitable Boy prime time on Sundays, and it was all Asian characters, and that went down really well. So it's sort of that sets a precedent, hopefully.
I think it would work really well as an adaptation because there's a lot of action. I mean, I'm only 62 pages in, so I can't make a.
There's a lot of action in 62 pages.
There's been quite a bit of action so far.
Well, that's good. I think and there's a lot of dialogue, and I think because I think very filmically, like very visually, because I grew up on like comic strips and movies, and I love watching films and TV, and so when I kind of imagine the scenes in the book, even when I'm writing, I kind of see them like a movie, sort of in widescreen in my mind. So I guess that translates somewhat into the way I write and how I write, and hopefully how the words on the page translate when someone's reading the book as well.
So Judith also says your fight scenes are great. And I think that's maybe why I said there was so much action, because I've just read past a fight scene. So, yeah. How do you research them, or do you just go with the flow?
Well, actually, I used to box when I was younger, so I know a bit, about the physicality and the movement and stuff like that. And I've watched loads of action movies. You sort of see fights and stuff like that. But the thing that I do is I basically choreograph every fight scene that I write. I choreograph in my lounge. So I basically play the part of each of the characters, both the protagonist and the antagonist, anyone who's attacking the main character, and I physically work out the movements, and I'll make notes, so I can work out, like, if he's thrown a punch with his right fist, where's his left fist going to be? What position would he be in? And where are his attackers? So would they be in a position to hit him? And I kind of ask all those questions and choreograph it very much like a choreographer would sort of choreograph a dance or something. And I work it all out. I have the notes, and then I can write the fight scene with some confidence in the movements, and then I try and sort of pare it down so that it moves sort of quite fast and stuff. But yeah, every fight scene is choreographed, and I think if people are watching me through the windows, they're probably thinking, "What on earth is he up to?" He's kind of moving around, looking like I'm being attacked and throwing punches and stuff.
Yeah, I was imagining you just like fighting yourself in your lounge when you were talking about it.
Yeah, well, not sort of literally hitting myself, but just kind of hitting imaginary where the assailants are and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, it's quite good fun.
Does anyone ever walk in on you and wonder what you're doing?
Well, they haven't, but I think people know what I'm doing. I sort of tell them. I mean, my daughter would just laugh and think I was mad, but she probably want to join in, probably start fighting with me as well. But no, yeah, fortunately, I haven't had anyone call the police on me just yet. Think he needs a straitjacket.
I think this is another Mike question. It says there's a lot of communal eating in your books. Is that a big part of your life as well, Mike? Plus, bring me more of that green chili sauce.
Yeah, that green chili sauce was good. That was really hot, that chili sauce. If anyone doesn't know, Mike does like his chili sauce. There is a lot of communal eating, but I think that's just part of the sort of Asian culture. People get together. When people get together, they have, there's lots of food involved. And for any kind of celebration and ceremony, there's always loads of food. Yeah, whenever I've been around to friends' houses, it's always a question of, let's eat. What do you want to eat? And so it's a big, and I think that's because it's part of the culture. And it is mentioned. I didn't really realise this when I was writing the book, but apparently there's a lot of food mentioned in the book, and quite a lot of reviews have said I got so hungry reading the book, and I was like, really, why? But then I guess because I wrote it over such a long period, I didn't notice that I was putting all those food references in, and maybe I just happened to be hungry at the time I was writing those bits. Ooh, what do I fancy for dinner? And it kind of like worked its way into the book. But yeah, so, and I think there's food in the second book as well mentioned, and it does happen. And Zach lives, so he doesn't live at home anymore with his family because there's reasons for that. But he lives in a shared house with a load of other guys, and so they tend to eat together. And yeah, I kind of described the food. They order from their favorite takeaway, and they have all this food there, and I love my food as well. So I can, when I'm thinking about it, I'm probably having this sort of picture. Oh yeah, I really fancy that, and then it's sort of like I'm able to sort of describe it, and I think it just sort of makes people hungry as well. Actually, I'm getting hungry now just talking about it.
Yeah. Maybe you could sneak in a cheese recipe.
In the third book, yeah, just for that reviewer. Yeah. Actually, I should just quote that review somehow. Have one of the characters say, "I'm really looking forward to making my first cheese."
Yeah. It's a challenge for you.
Yeah, in homage to that review.
So TG wants to know how regimented you are in your writing. What's a typical day for you?
Well, there hasn't been a typical day because I was lucky enough to get a grant from the Arts Council, which meant I gave up work for 6 months to write full time when I was working on the first book, and also again when I was working on the second book. And having that time is just amazing because that's one of the things that I really struggle with when so at the moment now I'm working full time as well, and then I sort of parent part time. I have my daughter half the week, and that leaves very little time for actual writing. So that it makes it really hard. But I try to write as much as I can, and I try and write every day, but it doesn't always happen. But when I had those two stints of 6 months, then I treated it like a job. I'd get up in the morning, uh, just have like a cup of tea, sit down, and start writing, um, and then have a break for lunch, and I'd sit and read for an hour or so, and then I'd just go back to writing. And I tend to, if there's nothing happening in the evening, I would write to about sort of 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the evening, sometimes later, just to try and get it done. But now with the new book, I'm going to be working full time again, so I will plan it out, and then I'll just try and, whenever I can fit in an hour or so of writing, just try and get something done.
So, what are your launch plans for Stone Cold Trouble? Because it's out very soon.
It's out on Thursday. Yeah, this coming
Yeah.
Thursday. So, well, I was looking forward to going out and having a nice launch and having lots of drinks and friends and stuff. But that, it's not going to happen. So, I think I might go out in the evening with a couple of friends, just go local, have a few drinks to celebrate, and then I've taken the day off on Friday, so in case I have a few more drinks than I intend to on Thursday. So I've got the Friday off. I'm going to go and see my girlfriend, and she's taking me to dinner on Saturday. So we're going to have a celebration. And Friday night will probably be champagne and stuff. So yeah, it's going to be quite modest to what the last one was. The launch for the first book was like a much bigger affair. It was in central London, and it went on till 1 o'clock in the morning, and there was a lot of very drunk people at the end of it, and that was great. But that's not going to happen this time.
So Sam's got a really good question. She said, "Has anything you've written surprised you when you've looked back over it, like a wow, did I write that moment?"
I think there've been there's been some of the dialogue and the banter, and I know it's bad to laugh at your own jokes and stuff like that, but it does make me giggle. I'll sort of read something and just think that's quite a good line, so I like that. And then there's a particular scene in Brothers in Blood, which I'm not gonna give away what it is, but there is a particular scene in that book which I didn't kind of set out to write the way it sort of transpired, and it's a scene that a lot of people talk about and have mentioned, and that wasn't like totally sort of planned out. So that I was quite, I don't know, it seemed like putting myself in the heads of the characters at that time. I thought this is what that character would do, so I made him do that. And I knew at the time when I wrote it, I thought it's a little bit extreme, and I don't know how people will react to it. And that scene did, even now thinking back, I think it was quite a decision to do that. And even one of the editors at my publishers said, "Look, I think maybe you need to cut this out." But I said no, it had to be, and there's good reasons for it to be there. And I kind of explained why. And then once I'd sort of explained, she said, "Actually, no, that's a very valid point, and yeah, it should definitely stay." And it's the scene that a lot of people sort of mention. And I've had messages from people and stuff like that. So yeah, that was quite surprising. In the second book, I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be any sort of scenes like that. I guess I'll find out. I mean, apart from just sort of the banter and the food and stuff like that. I mean, those are things that are not that they sort of surprise me, but I look back. Sometimes you sort of read back on your stuff and you're not sure, and you kind of think, oh, maybe I'm not that happy. I could have done this differently. I could have done that better. But it's nice when I read things back and think that's actually quite good. Hopefully, I'm not the only one who thinks that.
Samantha said, "Is there any subjects that you wouldn't write about?"
I think there's as with anyone, there's subjects that might make me uncomfortable. But if that's where the story went, and if that's what the story required, then no, I think I would write about it. And I think being uncomfortable is a good thing. If something is, it oversteps that line, and it is sort of taboo, then you need to sort of take it seriously and write about it with sort of serious intent. But if you shy away from things, I think that's kind of copping out. I think people. I mean, there's quite a few books where people have written about things that are really uncomfortable. Like maybe sort of child abuse and stuff like that. I know as a father, I'd find that really difficult. But if that was something that I was writing about, then you can't shy away from that, because that's kind of chickening out. And I think as long as you sort of write it from the heart and treat the subject matter with the respect it deserves, and it's not just gratuitous, then I don't think I wouldn't. I mean, I might, as I say, I might feel very uncomfortable, but then it's only right that I should feel uncomfortable if I was writing something of that nature.
So, would you ever be tempted to write any like spin-off kind of stories or novellas about the other characters in the books? Like
yeah, possibly.
So many great ones. Like I said, I'm not far in, but there's so many side characters are also fab.
Who are you thinking of?
Well, I quite like the brothers who are a bit horrid.
Well, yeah, actually, I don't know if I'd write those particular characters, but funnily enough that you say that, in Stone Cold Trouble, somebody's read a proof copy, and they actually sent me a message to say there's a character in that book called Tonka, and he's named after the Tonka toys that you used to be able to buy. And it was a very short message. It said Tonka needs his own book. So, and that kind of got me thinking. And I think I could imagine writing a collection of short stories based on those sort of characters and what they got up to as a spin-off from the Zack and Jags sort of series per se. That could be good fun to do. And that comment that somebody said about Tonka having his own book, that kind of got me thinking. But he's a bit of a shady character, so I don't know how I would do that, but it's a possibility.
I think this is Mike. He says the gambling uncle could carry a series on his own, plus Zack's grumpy boss.
Grumpy boss. I think he means Sid. Yeah, Sid's quite funny. I
was going to say Sid. I love Sid. He was what I was thinking of as well. He's great.
Yeah, a lot of people really like Sid. I thought he would be like really annoying and he would grate on people, but people really seem to like it. He's a real grumpy sod as well, and he's forever sort of like cursing Zack at the builder's yard where he works. So yeah, it's quite funny how people have sort of taken to him. An Uncle Lucky. He's called Lucky, but he's not really very lucky at all. I don't know, but I think they could definitely appear in further books. They could definitely, and that's one of the things. If you've read Brothers in Blood, there are characters who carry over. So if you like some of the sort of side characters that in that book, then you'll be pleased to know that they do sort of reappear in the other book, and I kind of like that. And I think from series books that I've read, I mean, I'm a massive fan of Patrick O'Brian, the Aubrey Maturin novels, and I remember just reading those, and then because I think there's like 20 of them in the series, and I'd always read one, and then kind of read a few other things, and then come back to another one, because I like to sort of ration them out, because I know there's a finite amount of those books. But reading those again, and it's sort of set on the ship, so you have the crew and you have all these members of the crew, and after a couple of books, you really kind of get to know them. They feel like old friends, and I think I kind of wanted to sort of emulate that to an extent. You know, where you have these guys turn up again, and it's like, oh, it's that guy. What's he up to? What's going on with him?
Do you keep notes about all your characters? So because they are. I mean, like I said, I'm not far in because you stepped in at the last minute. Normally, I would have read a book by you. So sorry.
No, it's not. That's not your fault at all.
They're lovely and rich, the characters. So how do you keep all those details straight in your head, especially like now you've gone into a second one?
With difficulty. I had to. There was a lot of like going back through the first book to find. When I was writing certain scenes, I needed to know exactly what had happened or what had been said. So I had to sort of go back and read bits. And I know some authors have like a character Bible and they write sort of characters. Yeah, I was too lazy for that. I think I kind of have it in my head, or I will go back and find things, or I'll sort of just make it up if I need to add a bit of information. I'll sort of add it in. But yeah, that's probably a good idea. I probably should. I mean, if I'm now going to write a third book, I think I do need to collate. I need to have like a spreadsheet or a document at least that with some of the events, and like if I've mentioned his favorite food or his favorite color, I should maybe make a note of that somewhere. Otherwise, I'll be getting it wrong, and people will be writing in the reviews and we say, not only does your book not mention cheese, you've got this wrong as well.
Sam says Tonka's a great name. How do you come up with each character name?
Yeah, well, I have to sort of think of them. I usually write a list of names and go through them and try and figure out which one fits the character that I'm trying to write. And sometimes I'll write the character for a while, and then I'll, and the name will bug me, and I'll think, no, I'm not happy with that name, and then I'll have to sort of think about it, and then I have to go back through the book and change the name. So I try not to do that. But I mean, the guys that I know in Southall, and this is the thing, there used to be a lot of gangs in Southall, and there's just loads of sort of like guys that I know. They all have like nicknames, and so I think about the sort of nicknames they have. I mean, really crazy nicknames. You wonder how people got them. So there used to be guys that I hung out with, like called Joker, Tarzan, Rhino, and you like really strange names. And I don't know how they got those names. I've with one or two guys I know, this is the guys that I know, but these are sort of larger than life characters that I didn't know, that I'd heard stories about. And you just kind of think, wow, those are some really funny nicknames. So I just thought, well, I need to find those sorts of names that are really sort of incongruous. One of the characters in Stone Cold Trouble, his nickname is Bongo, and I sort of explain how he got that nickname, and I do explain how Tonka got his nickname. But that's kind of fun to me. I kind of like that, and have it then explaining, and then you think, oh, all right, that kind of makes sense. And then but they're quite colourful, unusual nicknames.
Have you got any nicknames?
No, not that I can repeat here. No, I don't. My name's so short that it doesn't need to be shortened into any nickname. I did when I worked in the warehouse. So my name's Amer, and so my nickname was Sledgehammer. Yeah, and then from that it became Percy, because there was a singer called Percy Sledge. So then they used to call me Perse, short for Percy. It's just weird how nicknames sort of stick.
So, what's your most memorable moments as an author so far?
Well, obviously meeting Mike. Why are you laughing? That was, that wasn't serious. I suppose, well, winning the debut dagger was, but I wasn't really. I guess I wasn't an author. I wasn't a published author then. I think just getting to meet other authors. So that does include Mike. Just getting, so people whose books I've read and really enjoyed and loved, and just to sort of meet them and have a beer with them, and then I just find that so good. And being able to talk about books, and when they come up to you and say, "Oh, really enjoyed your book," man, what a thrill! That is such an amazing feeling. I mean, that's me from like sort of 15 years ago when I started writing for the, like, just taking it to try and take it seriously. Wouldn't to know that then I'd be sort of hanging out at festivals with a lanyard that says author and going into a green room and having beers with, like, you know, big name authors like with Ian Rankin and Mike Craven and people like that. It's just, yeah, it's so just rewarding and fulfilling, and it's just sort of like a dream come true, really, because that's the sort of thing I would have dreamed about when I was younger.
Yeah, I can. That's a really good answer. We ask that to a lot of our authors, and you always get a really interesting answer. We've got about 4 minutes left.
Is that all?
I know. It's gone really fast.
Listen, you should, and that's me without a drink. I mean, imagine if I was in the pub, I'd be like chatting your ears off.
See, you should have thought like me and bought a drink.
Yeah, well, then that's the trouble.
Do you want to remind everyone about your books?
Okay,
Again.
so yes, so my books. I should have. I see. If I was on the ball, I would have had copies right to hand that I could have held up. But
well, I can give you a prompt for this one. There you go.
So yes, my first book, Brothers in Blood, winner of the CWA debut dagger, a Times and Guardian Thriller of the Year, available in all good bookshops and even some dodgy ones. And my new novel, Stone Cold Trouble, coming out this Thursday. Has also been picked by the Times and the Observer as a thriller of the month for September. So yes, if you like action books with no mentions of cheese, but plenty of mentions of food and action and fights and some good dialogue, then please do go out and buy a copy.
They are really. The bit I've read so far means that it looks like.
Well,
a really
you know what we'll have to do is that in a month or so, when there's another gap opens up and you've had time to read this one and the next one, I should come back and do another talk.
You definitely should. You're more than welcome back.
And then you'll probably have loads of questions from the books, and then you'll probably take me to task over that scene in the first book, and then maybe ask me about the food as well. All the food references.
You definitely do have to come back, and I promise you've opened yourself now up to this. You're going to get messenger questions.
I'd love to. I'd love to come back.
But yeah. And so all I need to do now is say thanks. It's been great having you on. Thanks for stepping in at short notice.
My pleasure.
And do please come back.
I will definitely. Just ask. I'll have a beer next time as well. I'll have them lined up.
Yeah.
And maybe some peanut butter and some Marmite that I can wave at the screen for Mike.
In case he asks you a question that you don't want to hear.
No, just to wind him up.
I genuinely believed you when you said he liked it.